Big news out there in the Pac-12 happened last night, planned right for the inauguration, the proverbial news dump. Larry Scott, the commissioner of the Pac-12, is out, and they will be searching for a replacement for him. This comes as the Pac-12 has struggled for relevance in the college football playoff era, and as their Pac-12 network, which was much ballyhooed, has essentially fallen flat on its face as we look forward to what kind of demand there might be for the Pac-12 in the marketplace out there. It's going to be intriguing because I don't think that really Fox, ESPN, or NBC or whoever else, CBS, you want to toss out there, is really going to have a ton of interest in the Pac-12 product. I could be wrong, but the Pac-12 is a small niche compared to the monster audiences produced by the SEC and the Big Ten. And that Pac-12 network has proven to be an albatross in many ways that dragged down Larry Scott, the commissioner of the Pac-12. Now, Larry Scott's tenure did have some interesting components. He added Colorado, he added Utah, and took the Pac-12 to 12 teams from 10. But his big design, which was to potentially add Texas and maybe Oklahoma and expand the footprint of the Pac-12 all the way across the country and outside of the Pacific time zone, has not really worked out. And I'm not sure exactly how this will go going forward, but I do know Larry Scott made $40 million as the commissioner of the Pac-12, including over $5 million a year in recent history. And I think everybody's just fed up with the direction of the Pac-12. I don't think the overall brand of the Pac-12 is in a stronger position necessarily than it was when Larry Scott took over. And let me just say this, too. I remember talking to Mike Slive, the commissioner of the SEC, before Greg Sankey took over, and he said he ran the SEC like it was a public trust, meaning he knew it was going to exist after him, and the goal of a public trust is to hand it off in better shape than you found it. Can you say that the Pac-12 did that? I don't think you can. And I think by far the most important thing for the Pac-12 going forward, to me, if I were potentially in the running to be the next commissioner, is I've got to advocate for an automatic bid in the playoff. Because I believe I am correct that so far in the college football playoff, the only two teams to make it, and they only made it for 1 year each, were Oregon with Marcus Mariota in year one, and they ended up losing in the conference championship game to Ohio State and Urban Meyer in year one of the college football playoff. And then Washington under Chris Peterson, and they got dominated pretty soundly by Alabama in a game in Atlanta that wasn't particularly close. If I remember correctly, Washington scored first in that game and then did not score again for the rest of that contest. And Alabama rolled without too much difficulty. Really, the Pac-12 has been almost entirely irrelevant, and the school that is missing from that conversation completely has been USC. And really, USC is the only brand in the Pac-12 with national relevance. And when USC is bad or not really making much of a noise on the national scene, as has been the case for most of the Clay Helton era, then the Pac-12 struggles around them. But this is, I believe, an interesting story to follow because what needs to happen if you're the Pac-12 commissioner is you need to have an expanded playoff, and you need to figure out a way where that expanded playoff gets your champion in, or at least a team from your conference in, so that the Pac-12 remains relevant throughout the whole season and people pay attention. Right now, the Pac-12, frankly, for a huge percentage of college football fans in general, is just not particularly relevant on the larger scale. So that is news that is out there surrounding the Pac-12 as we prepare for the offseason in college football. and everybody tries to figure out. And by the way, you can't convince me that Larry Scott losing his job isn't also directly connected to how poorly the Pac-12 was able to handle the COVID situation. They come back and play 5 or 6 games. They don't start until November. They crown a champ that has whatever it is, 2 or 3 losses with Oregon. You can't tell me that the way that the SEC, we had the commissioner of the SEC yesterday, Greg Sankey, rolled right through conference play, crowned a champion who played 13 games. The SEC, every school played 10 games, except for except for Texas A&M, which lost its game against Ole Miss, and except for Vanderbilt, which lost its game against Georgia. 69 of the 71 games that the SEC scheduled, they played. The Big 12 crowned a champ in Oklahoma. The ACC crowned a champ in Clemson. All of those conferences found a way to get things done, and the Pac-12 curled up in the fetal position and played significantly less games than the Big Ten did. So you can't tell me that this is not timing connected, that Larry Scott is losing his job effectively right after the season ends, and every Pac-12 fan who was legitimately hoping their season would be able to be played looked at their commissioner and said, you did not lead at all. You actually followed, and you ended up, as a result, putting the Pac-12 where they are, which I think is in the worst shape by far of any Power 5 conference.